Namaste. This is Yoga Therapy Podcast, and I'm your host, Shira Cohen, yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and Ayurvedic wellness educator. In these conversations with experts in the field of yoga therapy, you'll find out what it is and how it can help you and your loved ones to reclaim well-being. We'll touch on physical as well as mental health, physiology, emotions, women's health, spiritual well-being, goddesses, and self-development in the fullest sense. Listening to another story can change ours, so thank you for showing up, and let's begin this journey together. Hey everyone, so today it's just me, and I want to talk about prevention and how we can use Ayurveda and the Ayurvedic principles to prevent illness, to ensure that we are more immune, to improve our mood, our well-being, our mental states. So Ayurveda looks at disease as happening in 6 different stages. So I'm just going to get straight into the subject. So these 6 stages happen slowly, and we can see them when we become sensitive enough. So one of the main goals of Ayurveda is for us to become so sensitive that the beginning stages of disease are felt as being unwell. And most of us, especially if we're in a Western culture, and even now I think it's a global thing, we are taught to ignore any signs of ill health. We want to have this mind over matter situation going on, but it is costing us, and we are seeing it in our global health crisis. So we don't just have physical health conditions, we have mental health and psychological health conditions that are so rampant that it's just taxing society, basically. But there are so many things we can do about it. So I just had a conversation with someone who was saying that medicine was or is the only option for her. But I think it's actually ignorance that has made us believe that that is the case. And just we need to understand that to live well, we have to make effort in different areas of our lives. We can't just focus on our career or our children or whatever the one focus is. We are multidimensional beings, and so we have to give time and effort and practice towards all these different areas, which means we need to dial down on some aspects of our life, because if you look at your life as maybe 12 different aspects or 6 different aspects: career, family, partner, personal, spiritual, what else have we got? Our health, and all these different factors of our life. Each one of them we can only give so much time to, but in our society, and especially now that life is just becoming crazy expensive, we have to give all our time to our career. We have no time for our children. We have no time for self-care. We have no time for spiritual practice, or very little. And so all those other aspects and factors in our life start to dwindle, and that causes ill health emotionally, and emotions affect our hormones affect our physiology, and our physiology affects our physical being. So that's how we create disease, from emotional, mental down to biological. It's very simple. I know it sounds too simplistic, but that's basically how it is. So we're just going to look at these 6 stages. I'll name them and we'll then go into them a little deeper. So the 6 stages are accumulation, provocation, spreading, deposition and localization, manifestation, and then destruction. So that's the last stage. And you can apply these to physical, but also mental, emotional, spiritual. So if we're talking about accumulation in the physical, and Ayurveda looks at us through the lens of the doshas when we're talking about physical, physiological, and even emotional and psychological areas. So the doshas are a combination of elements within our bodies that have different functions, and they have sites in the body where they are more at home. And when they stay in these sites, we are healthy. And obviously they're going to move to other sites, or they have functions in other sites, because I will explain these doshas very briefly, because doshas is a whole science in itself. So we have 3 doshas. The first dosha is kapha, and kapha is a mixture of earth and water. So anything, you don't think about mud, but you think of any combination of earth, so matter and mucus, or matter and viscosity, or anything that is juicy in the body. So you can think about synovial fluid, the cerebral spinal fluid, and anything like this. This is the kapha element. Okay, it's also what we find in the bones, the bone itself, the matter of the bone, the earthy element, that which you can hold and see, and it holds things together. Then you have the watery element that is also part of it, of kapha. So its function, kapha, is to gather things, to hold things, to form things, to give shape and density. Then you have pitta, which is the next one. Pitta is fire and water. So you can see it. How do you mix fire and water? It looks like oil. It looks light, mobile, but there is substance. You can see it. So this is more like our digestive juices. We find the heat in our blood moving through the blood. Blood also is pitta element. We find it in our muscles, the heat that we have and the energy we have. So pitta is about creating transformation. It's the process of change. It likes to move and creates activity. Then we have vata. Vata is air and space. So in the Sanskrit and the Vedic texts, we have 5 elements. So space is the other element. Without space, you don't have the other 4 elements. So you need the space element. So vata is space and air. And when you mix space and air, you have this very cold, very mobile, and almost ungraspable element, which is everything that moves in our nerves, everything that moves through the digestive tract from mouth to anus. We have this air element, this, and a space. You need that space for things to move. So we have it in all our channels. So that's how Ayurveda, it's very simplistic, I know, but you can apply those 3 to everything in your body and even in your mind and emotions. And to make it simple gives us all a handle on these things. When we make things so complicated that only a scientist can know, it just throws billions of people out without any knowledge. And that's why there's this huge disempowerment in the world right now, because a lot of people are just ignorant of the abilities we have to create health. So let's get to this doshic deviation. So when the doshas deviate, we start to accumulate the doshas in sites where they're not supposed to be. So when we have air inside our heart where it's not supposed to be, okay, we have oxygen, we are supposed to have a little bit of vata in our lungs and in the blood, but only very little. It shouldn't be big amounts. This is when it causes disruption, obviously. So that's when it starts to aggravate and it corrupts the bodily tissues. Same when we have too much kapha moving in, kapha, that slimy stuff, moving from our stomach, because we have slime, we have mucus through the whole lining from our mouth to the anus. We have this mucus, and the mucus is there because there's other things such as acids which kill bacteria in this tract. It has to, because we're always taking in viruses, bacteria, and all these things. So we have this very acidic enzymes in the body to destroy these pathogens. But at the same time, the body has to protect itself. So the membranes are covered in mucus. Okay, and this mucus is healthy in the stomach. It's healthy in our digestive tract, but it's not healthy when it goes in our lungs. And that's what happens when there's an accumulation of mucus. So kapha is moved out of its site and moved into another site, the site of air. The lungs are the air, the vata element. So that's how it works. And it is truly that simple. So if we can understand our body as these three different dynamics that are continually creating healthy life and generating new cells and communicating between one system and the other, as long as they're in the right proportions in each system. So where their home is, where they need to be, like Vata's home is the lungs, but it's also at the end of the digestive tract to expel and eliminate the food that we no longer need. So that's when it's in the right place. Okay, so disease starts to occur when we leave these doshas out of their home for too long. And too long doesn't mean days and weeks. That just becomes provocation. We start to feel unwell. We don't have as much energy. But then it starts to spread and then it starts to deposit. So when we have arthritis and rheuma and fibromyalgia, it's already depositing in different places where it shouldn't be. Okay, one of the doshas is out of its place. And you can tell by the symptoms. So if there's a heat involved, then you know it's pitta. If it's cool and there's weight gain or water retention, then you know it's kapha. If it's a lot of pain and movement, like the pain or the symptoms are constantly changing, then you know it's vata. So asymptomatic conditions are usually involving vata. So let's have a look at these stages. Okay. The earlier, obviously, we catch the stages or that we catch the formation of disease, the easier it gets for us to reverse that process. So we're reverse engineering. We're going to turn back that dosha. And obviously, when we get to destruction and manifestation, when we actually see the disease in the body, then it's usually a long process to reverse, or we can only bring it to remission, or then it becomes palliative. So it's really important that we see these in the beginning stages. So provocation is when the dosha starts to increase to a point of irritation, aggravating its natural site. Okay, so that's the beginning. I'll give you an example. When I first got COVID back in 2020, I knew I had it, and the tests said it was negative in the beginning. But I knew I had it because I could feel, and I do these practices, and I will tell you the practices after every day to check in with my body so I know what's going on. So I'm very sensitive. I've created that level of sensitivity where you just feel the same day compared to the day before that you're not well. Okay, so I felt a sore throat very gently, but enough. You know, there was a bit of an itch in the back of the throat. And then I ate cheese and then my throat was inflamed straight away. For me, I'm very sensitive. So, or you just ignore it, or you drink a tea and it's gone, and you do some honey, whatever. But no, instead, you can choose to not eat dairy for the next 2 weeks to make sure, because dairy is hard to digest and it aggravates the mucus system. So the mucus moves into the lungs, which then causes irritation in the throat and go into the tonsils and all the rest. So that's how you start. These changes can be experienced within days or weeks. Prolonged, it moves to spreading. So in spreading, dosha leaves its own site and spreads to nearby joints, organs, and tissues via the circulatory system. This can be experienced within weeks or months. If prolonged, it moves to deposition and localization. The dosha moves to an area of weakness. So, for example, you have knee injury or muscular imbalances, or any tissue that is under or overdeveloped. Maybe you have too much weight or tissue deposit somewhere. In these spaces and joints and cavities of the body, this is where the dosha will localize. And this can be experienced within months or years. Prolonged, it moves to manifestation. So manifestation, the first signs or symptoms occur while manifesting pathological changes in the new site. So this can be actually seen by Western medicine, experienced within years or decades. Prolonged, it moves to destruction. So tissue structure changes. Okay, this is when we start to see deformation in the bone structure or joints. The last stage is usually irreversible and requires palliative care. Sadly, this is also the stage of disease where we physically observe it, and that's why it's often too late when Western medicine intervenes. So that's why emotions are so important, because emotions are triggered by different things. So it's not just the past. I've read somewhere that it's the past. I agree, there's an element of past to emotions, but emotions are also triggered by the way we breathe, by the hormones that are being produced in the body at that moment. And our hormones are again activated by the emotions. So it's a two-way stream, but they're also activated by what we eat, the people we are with, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our life, our career, our family, all these things. So much is implicated when we have emotions and when our health moves into those 6 stages. So what can we do? Let's have a look. Let's start with then the digestive system. So the digestive system is where all life begins, and all life is absorbed through the mouth. So digestion starts in the mouth. It starts through chewing. So we don't chew enough. When we chew fully, we activate parts of the brain, first of all, that tell us we're satisfied. So people who eat very quickly, they are not getting that satisfaction because of the actual physical action of chewing. Okay, and then when we chew properly, not only did we break down the food into very fine molecules for our body to digest more easily, but we also mixed it with the enzymes in our mouth, and those enzymes and start the digestive process. Also, our tongue has receptors that tell the brain what kind of food we are eating. Are we eating proteins? Are we eating carbohydrates? Are we eating fruits? So all these foods need different enzymes and stomach acids. So if we're eating fruit with dairy, with God knows what else, carbohydrates, it's almost impossible to be able to digest that, because they all need a different enzyme, and your body can only produce 1 or 2 at a time. It cannot do the whole load in one go. So that's another thing, is food combination. Very important. So the next thing for to digest better is we need to eat at the same times every day. We need to have a rhythm. We need to move the body, but also move that stomach. Really physical, active movement helps to digest food better. It also helps to detoxify the body and to get the right juices going in the stomach. So how important is that when you remember that the stomach and the enzymes in your whole digestive tract, so from mouth to anus, needs to kill those pathogens. You need to have the right balance of acid levels, so your pH levels in the body, to be able to have that strong immunity. The first layer of immunity happens in digestion. Then, okay, food needs a break. You need to eat, and then you need to not eat for hours on end, at least 3 hours between meals. And if you eat an apple or any kind of fruit, don't eat anything for an hour afterwards. Fruit has totally different enzymes it needs for digestion. Don't mix fruit with anything else. Same with dairy. Dairy should be something you eat separate unless you mix it with carbohydrates. Then it's fine, grains. If you have a weak digestion, which you can tell you have if, for example, you get tired after eating, and you just feel like you have no energy, it's because all your energy is going to digestion. 1, you probably didn't chew properly. 2, you might not have enough acid in the stomach. And 3, maybe just the whole digestive process is slow, and you can help it by eating a piece of ginger, a slice of fresh ginger, just before your meal. You can add some salt, lemon, and pepper to that ginger, just on top of it, or just one of those 4 by itself will aid digestion. Okay, so very important. I will put a link in the show notes for how to combine foods. I have that on my website, and then you can download the PDF, and it gives you very clear 8 essentials that you need for better digestion. Okay, then you have your muscular system. So how do we prevent the disease process in the muscular system? Really important, again, is moving and making sure that you have strength and flexibility in the body. Not just flexibility. Flexibility is one aspect. Strength is another aspect. Each muscle needs to have strength and flexibility. Each joint needs each muscle on the front and the back, the sides, up and below, to have that range of movement. The range of movement is, again, in your joints. How far can you open your joints in all directions? If you think about it, in your day, what do you do with your arms? How often do you reach up? How often do you reach out to the sides? How often do you bend your back backwards? You know, these things are important. That's why yoga is such a wonderful tool, because you do all those extreme motions, and they don't have to be extreme. It doesn't have to be crazy bend over backwards, but do bend your back. Do a back bend, because it's really healthy for your spine to move in 6 directions. So backwards, forwards, twisting to one side and then the other, and then you have lateral bending to both sides. So as healthy as your spine is, that is as healthy as you will feel. Okay, the spine carries all your nerves from the cranium all the way down to your toes. So every nerve branches out from the spine. If your spine is feeling dried up and stiff, that's how your mind is going to be. That's how your whole body is going to feel and respond to the world. So movement, range of movement, doing twists, doing back bends, doing forward bends, doing side and lateral bends, very important. Flexibility, I just talked about that. So to have flexible muscles, flexible means they can stretch, and it doesn't mean weak, that you can just bend and fall over. But you want that kind of flexibility that is able to hold itself as well. So the best way to stretch your muscles in a healthy way is first to warm them up. So doing something like a standing seated pose, or if you don't know yoga poses, as if you're about to get up off your chair or about to sit down on your chair, but not quite sit down. So you've got this chair pose, we call it in yoga, and it really strengthens those hamstrings and the bum muscles, and then you can go into stretching those muscles. But first, stand there for a minute, actually getting the heat and the strength in those muscles, and that is when the muscle fibers, which are like little links, chains, will start to open up and allow you to stretch the muscle in a healthy way. So to create flexibility or stretch those muscles you want to first strengthen. And that's for every muscle. I'm just giving you an example of one. What else can we say about that? Yeah, so you want to create balance between the muscles, the front and the back. So when you do weight training or running, for example, you want to think about which muscles are you strengthening and which ones are not being strengthened. And then you want to compensate. You want to, what we call in yoga, counter pose. So we do counter poses to make sure that we do all sides, all muscles of each joint. Okay, and then you have in yoga, we have something called the Pawanmuktasanas, and I can also put a link to one of my videos where I do the Pawanmuktasanas, and it's moving through all the joints to actually increase your range of motion, ROM. Okay, and then we have the respiratory system. So how do we avoid disease buildup or the disease process in our respiratory? So the most important thing is learning to breathe properly and really exhaling. Understand, for example, that your lungs have a capacity of 3.5 liters as an adult. Okay, even 6 they say, but I've never been able to blow up a balloon 6 liters big. And I'm a pretty good breather. So no, I would say learn to first breathe, belly breathe. So lying on your back, for example, is the best way. Lying on your back and bending your knees, having your feet flat on the floor, quite wide, and letting your knees rest against each other. Your hands are on your belly, and then you can just feel the belly breathing. So that's the first thing, is learn to just belly breathe and to see how when you breathe in, you should have a rising of the belly, and when you breathe out, the belly moves down. Some people have inverse breathing, and it's just because they've never paid any attention to their 40 years of breathing or 50 years of breathing. But yeah, eventually you want with the out breath that the belly moves into the spine, and with the in breath it releases and the lungs fill up as the diaphragm contracts. So and then once you got the hang of belly breathing, you want to breathe out fully to really empty those lungs, and count how long it takes you to fully breathe. And really, I mean, expel till you think you can't expel anymore, and then relax, breathe in. And really breathe in till you think you can't breathe anymore, and just see the length of that, and see how much capacity you actually have, and then do that for a round of 10. Just fully breathe out, fully breathe in, fully breathe out. And notice that you have that lung capacity. And in the beginning, it might just be 4 seconds or 5 seconds. It might move up to 12 seconds or 20 seconds, depends. And it's not a competition, but what you do want to do is fully empty those lungs. Or if you think about your lungs, they have all these tiny little sacs called alveoli, or alveoli, I don't know how you say it. I think of ravioli. And they are like little grapes. We have hundreds, thousands of them, thousands of these little tiny grapes. If you were to spread all these grapes out, the reason they're all little grapes is to have more surface value. So if you spread it out, it would be as big as a football field. And I'm not exaggerating. I've checked different books and they keep saying this. So it's as big as a football field that you can take in oxygen. But you can imagine that if you don't breathe out properly from this huge amount of volume, this surface value of football field, if you're not breathing out fully, what stuff that is in our air is getting stuck in your lungs? Because your lungs have also this mucus. They have a very thin layer of mucus. Why? So that there's not friction when it rubs with the other side of the alveoli, or the outside, which is the muscles and the tissue or the membrane outside of the lung. So it needs that kind of soft mucus. But if we're not breathing out fully and we're not breathing in fully, imagine what builds up within your lungs over years or decades. So this is, again, thinking about accumulation, provocation, deposition, all these different layers of disease that we can prevent. Okay, so full capacity breathing, the effect of when you stand straight and lift up your rib cage and have the space to breathe. Another reason why yoga is so powerful. We learn to have correct posture, and that correct posture allows us to breathe more fully. When we breathe more fully, we have more oxygen. That oxygen travels through the blood to the brain, but also to all the organs. Every organ needs oxygen to be revitalized, to regenerate, to do the functions it needs to do. For example, your liver needs to do 500 functions every second of your life for the whole of your life. You imagine if it doesn't have at least the oxygen that it deserves, that it needs. Okay, so that is how we are creating our illness, our global health crisis. It is us just as responsible as food industry and pharma industry and tech industry is trying to destroy and just suck us dry. I'm sorry, but they are. And we are also contributing by not doing our part. And I know we are being asked to not take part in our life, to not be that contributor, but it is up to us to take that back, because no one is going to care about your life more than you. So if you don't do it, no one else will. Okay, so it's up to you to look after yourself. Okay, so I will get off my soapbox and get back to what we were talking about, which is prevention and health and vitality creation. And we can do that. So let's see. The next one is circulatory system. So our circulatory system, our blood cells, our lymph cells. Our lymph cells is actually a different system, but they follow the same path. So the circulatory system is the red blood cells. And then the lymph system is the white blood cells. So the red blood cells, they carry the nutrients, they carry the iron, minerals that our body needs, that all the organs need, and every cell needs. So think about your cells. Every part of your body, every organ, even your brain, even your nerves, they are cells. Cells that take different forms and have different functions. And when you think about the incredibleness of being human, or just being anything that is alive, we were all just cells. Okay, from the ovum and the sperm, it's all just cells. First, these cells are just identical stem cells, and then they start to differentiate within 8 days in the human embryo. It starts to become intelligent and understand that it has a different function than another cell. And that's when we start to form the nervous system, the gut, the brain. The heart is the first organ to form. And it starts beating, I think, at 3 weeks already in the embryo. It's incredible. Okay, and then the brain starts to form, and then when the brain has formed, it starts to push that little heart into the center. Now imagine all those cells. If they don't get the right oxygen, they don't have the right posture, they don't have the right food, they don't expel the toxicity that is in our air and food, what's going to happen? What is the cumulative effect of all those factors? You can think about that. Just use your imagination, go wild. And it's so easy to see how it already goes wrong. Now, as adults, we have the cells we have right now. If you eat a certain diet, like I've been on one of these rice diets that people do when they have very severe cancer or illness, you eat 10 days of just brown organic rice. You can eat as much as you want. You have to chew 40 times every mouthful. You can add a little bit of miso and gomasio. And what it does, it allows your body to get the nutrients it needs, but it also knows what it's getting. And because you're chewing fully, your body has all the enzymes to digest. So you're not wasting time on digestion. You're actually only using all the other time and energy from that food to heal and regenerate the cells. So you have new blood cells every 7 days. all the blood cells are cleaned, cleared, and gone. So the spleen destroys the old blood cells and then creates new ones. So you can imagine what that looks like within the body when you have these new cells eating only organic food. I felt amazing. You feel crap for the first 3-4 days, but then you start to actually cleanse. And we can do this. We can at any time reset ourselves by just choosing a healthy diet, not one where you are not eating. You don't need to fast. I do think fasting has its function and purpose, like we spoke with Vijay Lakshmi last time. I'm not very good at it because I used to be anorexic. So it's, for me, it's a little bit triggering. If it happens naturally, like 2 weeks back, I had COVID and then I just wasn't hungry for 2 days. I didn't eat, but that's a natural way to fast. And then it doesn't trigger me at all. But yeah, we can reset ourselves through some diet like this. I am not suggesting to do this rice one. I would suggest that you go to a nutritionist or someone who can guide you in this, because that is a totally different art. It's not my scope of practice, but I am telling you what tools are out there, and that when you reset your cells, all of a sudden the body's like new. It's like you're reborn on a biological level, because you have been only working with, so I didn't have any work at that time, so I could just, it's like a kind of retreat. It's not a fun one. It doesn't make you feel good, only afterwards. And I think that's one of the big things we have to remember about preventive work. It's not so much during that we feel good, it's the after effect that we're looking for. You have to keep remembering the result and the goal. That carrot. You need to have that carrot in front of you. Okay, so once you reset those cells, you can imagine that your circulatory system has all these new healthy cells that have had the time to fully absorb food, to be fully functioning, intelligent. You have been conscious when you were chewing. So consciousness is another huge part of Ayurveda and yoga. If you don't breathe consciously, you are just creating vata, not prana. Prana, which is your bioenergy with conscious awareness. Okay. It has the healing potential. We say that is life. Life is breath, but breath with consciousness. So you imagine every cell has had food that has been consciously chewed, consciously experienced, consciously digested. It is such a different experience to the way we eat our food with no mindfulness at all. We're just swallowing, chewing, swallowing, chewing, swallowing. Maybe we taste 2 seconds from the 3 minutes that we're eating, if that, if we're not busy thinking or working or whatever our mind is doing, because we're so much in our mind. Okay. And then just imagine what cells you have created with that consciousness or with that unconscious eating patterns. And then even just the act of choosing your food. What are you going to eat today? And what are you going to eat tomorrow? What are you going to eat over the whole week? What do you eat over the whole day? Are you getting all those things you need? So one wonderful way to look at it is look at your plate and see that you have the colors of the rainbow. So from red, orange, yellow, green, maybe some purples. Obviously, we don't have blue food. You don't want to eat blue food. But yeah, you get what I mean. You want to have a whole range, and then you have the browns and the white. So you want to have all of it. We don't want to have just one color or a few colors. Most people eat a lot of red, green, and white. So the Italian food. Okay, so let's look at our immune system. How do we strengthen our immunity? And another way to strengthen our circulatory system is, again, movement and breath. So how important is movement and breath? Very, because you're affecting all these systems, your muscular, Your muscles also need oxygen. They also need you to breathe properly. Your lymph system. So your lymph system is your immune system. It is your spleen, all those little glands that we have around different joints. The tonsils are part of the lymph system. So when they used to take out the tonsils, that was a really stupid idea, because you were taking out the protective part that was saying, if you get any sicker now, there's an alarm from the tonsils, your lungs will get an infection, pneumonia, bronchitis, whatever, tuberculosis. So taking them out was just stupid. Yes, they inflame quickly, but that's just a signal. It's a warning. It's like a red light flashing. So, and then obviously they follow the whole circulatory system. So it's the white blood cells, the pus at the end of an infection is all the dead white blood cells. They've done their job. They neutralize the pathogen or the virus or the bacteria that was in the body. And obviously, if we don't have a healthy immune system, it starts to spread. These pathogens start to move on into other areas than just the blood and the immune system. Okay, so then the immune system, these little, what they call B cells, T cells, lymphocytes, they find these pathogens and bring them to these little glands. And in the glands, it gets sorted out to where it needs to go, and they get destroyed either in the liver or the spleen or in these little glands if they can do it. So it depends how sick we are and how much of the pathogen there is. If we're looking at the lymph system or our immune system from a spiritual level or psychological level, our immune system is our sense of self. It is me versus virus, or versus other, or versus the exterior world. Okay, we have this ego self. Each cell has an ego. Each cell knows it's a cell. A cell communicates to other cells. A cell has lots of receptors. It has all these tiny little pathways that allow things to come in and go out. So it's also a system. It's like our digestive system. A cell has a digestive system. Okay, it digests through these little receptors, moving in, and other ones, I can't remember what they're named, but they go out again. So there's information coming in and out of this little cell, little self, little ego. So our ego, sense of self, who are we? What do we do in this world? Do I have a function? If I don't have a function, my immunity will go down. So people who are unemployed will have lower immune functions, if they feel they don't have a function to or a service to the society. And I've seen that in a lot of people who are depressed. They also have low immunity because they have no sense of self, or their sense of self has dwindled. They have the feeling or the idea or the sense that they are not worthy. They are not participating or contributing to society. And everyone wants to be a contributor, whether it's conscious or not. We all have the desire to be of benefit to others. We are social species, and social species, whether you're talking about krill or human beings or whales, we all have the desire to be significant to other. We are connected. We live only for each other. We don't live for ourselves. And that is one of our big illnesses, I believe, in this society. It's so selfish. Everything has come down to marketing and selling yourself and business. We have lost the soul of service, I believe, in a lot of sectors, and even the spiritual ones. Just because the tools we use, the tech we use, is driven by that model of extraction. So if we use tools that are extractive, it's going to affect our own business and sense of self. So that's, again, me getting off my soapbox now. Last 2 or 3 is skeletal. So our skeletal system, how can we make our skeletal system strong and prevent illness there? Again, movement, breathing, and nutrition. So these three are going to come back through every system. So movement, you really want to think about your bones. They are the cell creators. Okay, so a lot of your cells, nearly all of your cells are created in the marrow of the bone. And if your bones are not healthy, imagine, for example, let's just use this as an example, a mother who hasn't nourished herself, hasn't looked after herself, her cells are all weak, the cells don't communicate well to each other, she gets pregnant and then starts to form this baby. How healthy do you think those cells will be of that forming baby if her cells are the template and those cells are not well communicating, they're not well connected to each other, they don't have a proper identity or self, ego? And what is the template going to be from that? Will it be more watered down? Maybe, maybe not. So it depends. Okay, there's nurture and nature. And we have to think about nature. Nature is what we call the DNA, which is not true. Nature is much bigger than DNA, but it's an aspect. So our DNA affects 2%, and nurture, what we choose to do, all these exercises and things, is 98%. And I will keep saying this. People don't believe me when I say this. I have read it in more than 10 different medical, medical published articles. It is a known fact in most science that DNA is only 2% of the effect. Okay, so what we do affects what we create. And then even DNA can be switched on and off through nurture. So nurture is even stronger than that. And then science just seems to focus on DNA. But when we come back to that point, we can make it relative again. How much say we have in our health and how much do we need to depend on those pills if it is actually nurture rather than nature? Okay, it's a choice. And we have to make many choices. And I think this is what we're being shown at the moment in this world, is we have to start making difficult choices and saying goodbye to all that, which is not healthy and sustainable in the long run with 8 billion people on a planet. That is a little imbalanced, to say the least. Okay, so for strong bones, jump or run or do things where you really have impact on the bone, where the bone feels some strong resistance from an external factor. And this also makes the self, the ego of the bone, strong. Oh, yes, I am in relation to the rest of the world in this way. I have this much capacity. I have that little capacity. And how do you strengthen that? So also weights, doing weight training or pushing things or carrying heavy things. This makes the muscle pull on the bone much stronger in the point of insertion. And that is where that bone is going to get stronger. So also being upside down. That's why, again, yoga is wonderful. Because when you are in different positions to gravity, those bones are turned upside down, or the bone is turned on a diagonal level upside down when you're in down dog, which pulls the weight from gravity pulling on your bone and those muscles pulling on those bones in a totally different direction. Makes the bone stronger in that area, because you have to remember your bone, if you look inside a bone, it's like a sponge. It has all these kind of interweaving vessels, and it's not an outer container that is nice and neat and linear. It is all these different shaped dynamics of interconnected vessels, and they each need, on each side of your bone, and each little vessel needs gravity pulling on it. So that's why being upside down or being in strange positions like yoga does so well is really good for bone health. Okay, next is your nervous system. Okay, nervous system. When we think about our nervous system, it is all these little thin wires. What's really important to realize is parts of the nervous system, not all, but some of it is myelinated. And that is a kind of layer, like a mucous membrane, only it's oily and fat. If we don't have enough oils, healthy oils, and especially oils like omega-3, these myelinated nerves become, how can you say, well, they're aggravated and irritated, and they're just weakened because they need that insulation. It's an insulation to have those fat layers around these nerves, and the nerves need it to communicate well. If you imagine electricity, which is what's basically happening, our nerves are lots of little channels for electricity to move and to communicate quickly between the brain and my little pinky. If those nerve cells don't have the right quantities and qualities of oils, the communication can get slow, the communication get muddled. That's what happens in Alzheimer's and dementia, is the communication between those wires is not working well. And when you think about all the electricity that we're using, don't underestimate their power to disbalance us as well. Now I am eating since 2 years from electric cookers because we have gone off from gas and things like that. So you're eating more electricity. Everything is electric. So imagine your body. I've noticed that when I cook on these induction things, that I need a lot more oil for my mushrooms, for example, especially mushrooms, because mushrooms are quite dry. And the oil is just soaked up because you're using electricity. It needs a lot more oil. Okay, so we need to increase the oil. That's so important for our nervous system. Also, the breathing techniques, mindfulness, just sitting and not doing anything is so good for the nerves. So your nerves are constantly communicating. Even as I'm speaking to you, you are absorbing all this information and placing it in different areas of your brain. And this needs to be digested after I stop talking. There's still things being processed, and that uses all these nerves. The only times we don't use those nerves is when we're in deep sleep states. So we have 4 cycles of sleep, and it's only in one of those cycles that you are actually regenerating those nerves and all those cells in your body. So there's very little time. So when we meditate, or when we just sit and breathe and watch the breath, we are taking the senses from seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing, touching inside the body. And that is withdrawal of the senses, pratyahara, we call it in yoga. And that is also when we allow those nerves to rest, and when the body can, or the mind, can digest our thoughts, our experiences, our impressions, our perceptions. And then what we express is a product from that exchange. So yes, the nervous system needs rest. And again, yoga has that. And when we breathe and do our practice mindfully, even if it's a physical practice, we can do it with mindful, slow breathing and really tuning into the body and moving somatically. So really feel from the body, feel what's going on in the joint, and then move from that feeling. It's very different, and that totally calms down the nerves. Feeling safe is really important to the nerves. So if we don't feel safe, maybe we have a lot of anxiety, maybe we have a lot of things going on, we can create trust and that feeling of safety either by hugs, physical contact. And if you can't, if you're alone and you don't have physical contact, then just placing your hand on your heart, feeling the breath, feeling your heartbeat, and just taking a few minutes to check in with yourself. So self-contact, you can self-massage. A great thing that I just did last night again, sometimes you forget these simple things, is just a warm foot bath and then oil massage those feet with nice, warm, heavy oils. Again, oils are really good for the nerves. also for anxiety. For depression, if you have depression, it's always linked to, I'm not saying it's the cause, but it's always linked to systemic inflammation, and especially inflammation in the brain. Same for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and dementia. There is inflammation in the brain. Inflammation is inflamed. There's too much fire. There's too much going on. The foods we eat are very important for this inflammation. Think about decreasing salt, decreasing sugar, decreasing processed foods. This all helps the nerves and gets rid of that systemic inflammation. Also, something I completely forgot to mention in the very beginning. So there's 6 stages of disease. There's also 6 flavors. Okay, 6 flavors in our food. So we have sweet, salty, sour, and that's what most people in the West eat. They eat those 3, and that's all inflaming. It's all increasing the heat, the pitta principle or dosha. And then we have other 3, which is spicy. Most people have added that, which helps to digest, but it's also inflaming. And then you have bitter, which most people hate, and especially in the West, but it has a function. And like our cells need all those different factors to be healthy, our body and our digestion needs these. So it needs bitter and astringent. So if you're asking what the hell is astringent, think about green unripe banana, or what else? Raspberry is astringent. Flax seeds, where you get your omega-3s, is astringent. So astringent and bitter, okay, will reduce inflammation. Very important to add that to your diet. Rucola, if you're a crazy fan of Italian food, rucola is really great. Anything bitter, neem, just drinking teas that are bitter, and you decrease the pitta dosha. Okay, so the last thing is the hormonal system. So our hormonal system is our endocrine system. So the glands, these glands don't, they produce all these different hormones. We have 74 different hormones that are known. There are probably more that are not yet discovered. And every cell in your body has receptors for these different hormones. And some cells are more open to certain hormones than others because of the function of that cell. We produce every single hormone. We don't need medicine to produce them. If we're not producing them, then we have to look at what we've just discussed in this last, 40 minutes, which is diet, breath, movement, sense of purpose, and how are we catering and nurturing ourselves on all those different aspects of what we are. We are so much more than our career. We are so much more than just a mother. We are so much more than just a partner. We are not just ourselves as the physical person. We are an emotional, mental, spiritual being. Okay, so all those aspects need nurturing. All those aspects need to be taken care of. And if we have a work or a job, or if we have a child or a family member that is taxing us so much that all those other things are neglected, then we have to see and ask for help so that we can, and this is boundaries, and having a look at our life. So I'll put a wonderful tool or a link to a wonderful tool in the show notes called the Wheel of Life. And the Wheel of Life helps you to get a very quick overview of these, and it'll have these different aspects of yourself. And you can score them from, in a circular pattern, you can score them from a 1 to 10. And through that, you can see which parts of yourself you are neglecting and which ones you're spending lots of time on. There's probably where you feel very confident and wonderful, and that's where you want to spend all your time because that's where you feel confident and wonderful. So it just becomes like this catch-22 where you only want to be in the places where you feel good, and that just increases your confidence in that area where you already are great. So, and then it's more a question of how do you spend a little less time there and add that time to areas where you're appalling or lacking. Let's be gentle. And then we have more confidence in different areas, and then we can move that circle. So we're in a circle and we have all these 6s, and maybe some places we have 10s, in another we have a 3 or a 2 or a 0 even, and then it looks like a star shape. And you don't want to have this where every aspect of your life you feel different. It's exhausting in itself. So you want to bring those 9s down to a 6 maybe, and those 3s up to a 6 or a 5 or a 4, and then it's more congruent and you feel more whole. Then you have that healthy self ego that we all want and that we all need and that we can all have. Okay, and so the hormonal system is the intermediate. It is the communicator between systems. So my respiratory system speaks to my brain, speaks to my reproductive system through the hormones they flush within seconds. They're in the bloodstream and they're already telling you what's going on when you fall in love. There's different hormones in your body than when you're depressed, or when all of a sudden you have to give a speech, or and there's a combination of those hormones. It's not just one hormone because there's so many. It's a combination of certain things. And if you look in PubMed, which is all the published medical articles of peer-reviewed research, you will find what I'm talking about. So everything I'm saying has been researched. I'm not just making this up. This is all coming out of my book. And yeah, so the hormonal system is really important because it communicates those things between systems, so that my respiratory system knows what my brain is thinking and what I want to be doing and what I need to be doing. It's preparing us for the future, and it's taking into account the past. So it's a really incredible system. We have 7 endocrine glands. So the lowest in our body is our reproductive organs. Then we have the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the thymus, the thyroid, the pituitary, the hypothalamus. These are all part of the endocrine system, and they all speak together. So we have this, what they call the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamus, pituitary and adrenal axis. When this is out of whack, which it is for most people, especially after this COVID nonsense, we have these high levels of stress, which is adrenaline and cortisol, to these extremes that it disrupts the hormones of our pituitary and hypothalamus. The hypothalamus and the pituitary work in tandem. So the pituitary is like, the hypothalamus is like the thermostat, speaking, feeding back what's going on in the body. And then the pituitary kind of says, okay, well, let's do this, and changes the thermostat. So what happens when the pituitary and the hypothalamus are exacerbated by the adrenal glands, then it disturbs our biorhythms, our sleep, our eating rhythms, our hunger, and all the rest that comes with that. So energy, mood, emotions. So that's why it's so important. And I didn't speak about biorhythms, but as you can imagine, what we eat, what we do, how we breathe, how we move affects our biorhythms, and our biorhythms affect our sleep. And all regeneration happens during sleep, meditation, or deep resting states, which we can do when we do, for example, restorative yoga, which is yoga with all these props where you lie down and are supported in a sense that the body is no longer moving, and therefore the nerves are no longer being, stimulated, and therefore the whole nervous system goes into a state of rest. And that's when the body regenerates, the mind regenerates, and the heart and soul start to feel whole again. So you can see there is a lot we can do to increase hormonal health. It's so related to breathing. Breathing is a big part of that, because the hypothalamus and pituitary are very close to the breathing center in the brain. Breath has a huge impact on how our hormones work. Okay. Also, what else is important is how we walk, how we talk, communicating, people, social interactions, feeling like we have a social network or creating one is so important to hormonal health. Hormonal health affects emotional health and psychological health. When our hormones are imbalanced, we can have anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar. It is all these imbalances, severe, long, chronic imbalances of hormones, and that the body's cells, the receptors of those cells are not opening to certain hormones anymore, just because it's use it or lose it. If we're not using certain aspects of self, they will dwindle. And so when there's a long-term not use of those certain receptors for certain hormones, it seems like our body is not capable of making them or absorbing them, but that's not true. It's just we have to turn it back and we have to make effort. And that's when you see that when we're in the middle of a healing process, sometimes we feel, or you see results within the first days, and then all of a sudden it stops. It doesn't mean that it's not working. It means you have to keep going, because now you're breaking through, and there's a part of the body or part of the cells or the systems that are going into remission. They're like testing, is this really happening? I've been used to these chemicals, and now you're giving me these chemicals or these hormones. So hormones are just chemicals. Hormones are the same things as neurotransmitters, only they're called neurotransmitters when they're being released between the brain cells, which are neurons very closely connected. But they are the same thing, only hormones just travel longer through the body because they're going through different systems. And so it's a longer process, but they are the same chemical constituents. So let's see what else. Have I missed anything? Yeah, okay. Vagus nerve. So we were talking about the nerves, and I forgot to talk about the vagus nerve, which is the most important nerve that we work with in yoga therapy and yoga and meditation. And we can activate it by doing things such as extending the out breath. That gets us into the vagal rest and digest. That's when we restore and heal. So breathing out very slowly, and we can increase its effectiveness when we do something like or Why do you think that increases it? One, we're extending the out breath, and we're doing it with sound. So what does sound do? It vibrates, and it's vibrating the nerves in our body, all the cavities, all the cells. And also think about it in a yogic context, is we think in thoughts. If we're making a sound and it's extending that sound, we're not thinking for that moment. So the mind is also stilled. The mind has just been cleared for those, maybe it's 10 seconds, 20 seconds that you can extend that out breath. But vibration and sound is very important for this vagal nerve. So when we hear about fight, flight, freeze, and rest and digest, or tend and befriend, we're talking about this nerve, and it has 3 pathways. So the freeze is a different one to fight and flight, but it is going into that sympathetic nervous system. So we have the sympathetic, the parasympathetic is the rest and digest. Sympathetic is to be active, which is what we need in the morning to wake up and to do sports or to be good, excel in our work, if we have to perform or present something, pitch ourselves. then we need that active, sympathetic fight, flight. It's good to have in small amounts, especially in the morning. You don't want to have it in the evening because it will bring out the adrenaline and the cortisol, and cortisol stays in your body for 13 hours. So we don't want that because we don't want to stay awake 13 hours from the afternoon. Okay, so it's really good to do intense exercise in the morning before you have to go to work or do whatever you have to do, because then you start that cortisol up. If you get your cortisol levels up every day, you will help to restore in the morning, you will help to restore those biorhythms. So some people who have sleeping issues, their cortisol usually is triggered in the afternoon, and that's why they can't sleep at night, and they feel drowsy in the morning. So you feel like shit in the morning and wide awake at night. Terrible. And that again is hormones. So cortisol, adrenaline stays in the body for only a few hours, or when it's used. If you do intense exercise, then that adrenaline is out of the system. I think I've said this before, you can shake your body and shake it out of the system. That's a really good way to get adrenaline out, is just shake, really like do the proper shakes. Get those shakes out. And that's probably why people who have come downs and what do you call that when they're kicking their drug habit, they have this shaking because a lot of shit needs to come out of their system. Okay, and what else did I want to say? Yeah, and so the vagal nerve is essential to healing. It is very easily activated through yoga because we do a lot of breath awareness. We do these mantras, and we move the spine. So that's another way to get that vagal nerve to be regulated into that rest, digest, and tend, befriend, and social interactions, being with people, community, having a good conversation with someone you love, just being heard, even going to a therapist, watching someone else's face as they speak and really connecting with them. This activates that vagal nerve. That vagal nerve then switches into that rest and digest, which then also tells that hypothalamus and pituitary, hey, everything's okay. You can start to produce these different hormones now. So it all works together. You see, nothing works by itself, and that affects those cells, and those cells affect your energy, and that's how we create health. It's a long story, but if you imagine how you are made, how you are conceived, how every cell works from the moment it is created to the moment it dies, it is working. And that is what we need to be doing. Okay, we don't need to see work, and especially work on ourselves. Self-care is work. Okay, so one of the ways you can enhance your digestive health, well, your whole general health, one of the things that I do, which I'll explain now, the tips at the end, is I wake up in the morning. Before I do anything else, I wash my face. I gargle water, cold water, keep it in my mouth. That way I get the kapha to come to my mouth. So any slime or excess mucus that is in the mouth, throat area, even in the lungs, if you hold the water long enough, I gather the kapha into my mouth. Okay, with this cold water in my mouth, and I splash cold water on my eyes. So the heat, the pitta that is in the eyes, so your eyes are connected to your liver, and your liver is connected to heat. All the digestive areas connected to the pitta in the dosha of fire. So I get rid of the fire from my eyes with cold water, and I keep that cold water in my mouth for the time that I do that. Then I spit out the kapha. It usually comes out, and then you look at your tongue and you clean the tongue. There is usually some excess foods or toxins that are there, and you just brush it off. That's it. Get rid of it. Spit it out. You can do, they call it tongue scraping. I find it a bit too harsh for my tongue, so I just use a toothbrush. Then I go and drink warm water, 2 glasses. So I go straight to the toilet after that. You don't need to do the lemon juice or the, some people do vinegar. I used to do that, apple vinegar with lemon juice. It's pretty strong. You can do that if you're really sick. You can do that if your acid levels are too high. It brings it back to neutral. But I wouldn't do it for a long time. I did do it for a long time. I was suggested by a naturopath to do it, but it was way too aggressive for me. What else? And then, then I do yoga exercises, meditation. I do all of that before my daughter stands up or while she's getting up. So, to do all those things, it depends, but I'd like to have an hour and a half to do it. So I like to wake up 5:30, 5 o'clock. So I can do that at a nice, gentle pace. So it depends. People think they are night people and other people think they are morning people. In Ayurveda, we say we are all morning people. We just don't know we are. And we just need to change that rhythm. That's all. So what we do say, which I think is important, is that if you look at the clock, we can look at the clock and see them also as these 3 doshas, the kapha, pitta, vata. And the pitta time or the fire time is from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, whether that's evening or morning. And fire time is to be active, is to do things. Then we have from 2 o'clock till 6 o'clock is vata time, so time to do extreme things or to really rest. It's time for lightness. It's a time for connection. And then we have the kapha time, which is from 6 o'clock till 10 o'clock. Okay. And so 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock is a time to be more restful, do more calming things. But in the mornings, you want to get up between that 2 and 6. Okay, and we say waking up at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. We call it the meditative hour, Brahma Murti. So we say waking up at that time is actually healthy, whereas some scientists say that you're lacking sleep, but depends on what you're doing and depends how much sleep you need. That also changes per person and how often you meditate or do other things of self-care. And then we say you want to go to sleep in the kapha time, so between 6 and 10 o'clock, because kapha is about condensation, about gathering, about heaviness. You're going to get your best sleep before 10 o'clock. And definitely before 12. If you start to go to sleep in the pitta time, so from 10 to 2, you're going to have that fiery element. And so you're going to be actually active, mentally active and awake, and you want to be doing things. So it's better to go to bed before 10 o'clock. And I've noticed, and I've tried this for years and years and years. And if I go to sleep before 10, even if it's just 9:30, I will sleep deeper and better and feel refreshed. Even if I wake up at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock, I will feel refreshed. Whereas if I fall asleep after 10, usually it takes me a lot longer to fall asleep. I'll be tossing and turning for ages, and then I'll have a more fitful sleep, so I'll wake up more easily. So we all wake up 3 to 6 times a night, and we just don't remember it. So that's also something we need to normalize. 8 hours of sleep. No prehistory human ever slept 8 hours in one go. That's a load of nonsense. Can you imagine? You had to wake up to make sure everyone was still safe and alive, to see that the fire was still going, because making fire is hard work. So that myth definitely needs to be busted. Okay, I hope this helps, and I will leave the links in the show notes, so the Wheel of Life, the Pawanmuktasana exercises, and the Ayurvedic essentials for digestion. Okay, Take care, be well, and please, if you want to support the show, I would really appreciate it. It does take time, energy, money to do. I love doing it, but I would love support as well. Thank you.